Well, hi everyone, it's Ren here. Welcome to my room, guys. As you'll notice, this is a little bit unusual. This is a little bit different because I'm releasing a video on a Thursday, which hasn't happened in a long time. But hopefully, it'll be a nice little surprise that you will enjoy. I'll use today to hopefully conclude my reflections on the best kind of religion or best kind of spirituality writ large for INFJs. See if we can, reach a verdict that makes a modicum of sense. Let's go. Before I move on, remember, the Ecstatic Soul, my book on the INFJ, is available at the links down below. Check it out. It's less than $10 and it is, very deep investigation of the INFJ type. It has lots of reviews online that you can check out to make up your mind. Another book that I have written recently is the INFJ Castle. It's more if you're into fiction and if you're into supporting my work. INFJ protagonist in this story, and I think something that I came to realize recently, probably an exploration also of the very fictional kind of, exploration of the difficulties that certain personalities, maybe in this case an INFJ, have of integrating the world, finding their entry point, as I recently described it, in a video, how to find our entry point in the world. And in fact, the question of religion is, or spirituality writ large, again, there might be people who are very spiritual but who do not consider themselves religious. The question of spirituality and religion is a question that feeds into this, because we live in a disenchanted world. The Western world is the most disenchanted world of all, probably, but it's not the only one. Societies move at different speeds toward disenchantment. Now, if you remember, you could describe disenchantment as the retreat of the sacred from everyday life, the domination or the dominion, the supremacy of secularism, of secular time. We do not really experience the sacred in our daily lives in the way that, communities 500 years ago still could experience. We live in a society for whom the monastic orders, like monks, but you can also include sisters and, probably clergy to some extent, but, but if we focus more so on the monastic orders, we often don't really see them as higher vocations anymore. People whose ascetic and deeply holy life is in some sense working towards us and working for us. When we repay them by supporting them the way we can, we tend to look at those orders more and more as curiosities, things that we like to read about and we find kind of quaint. Anyway, long story short, we live in a disenchanted world where, for many reasons, that happened for many reasons, and certainly the advance of science, the progress in science, the propagation of the scientific worldview played a part. Not only, it has been my point throughout these videos that when it comes to a type like the INFJ type, that can come as a challenge because the way that the INFJ experience themselves in the world does feature some dimension of enchantment, which is linked to inferior SE. The more archaic your SE function is, in some sense, the more you're going to have an SE function, especially if you follow the Jungian arguments, the collective unconscious, and the fact that our functions and the phenomenological expression of our functions, everything that surrounds our psychology regarding the functions, connect to a collective unconscious that is transpersonal, or at least collective. It's not just personal. So for INFJs, this enchanted world is in some sense a world that is, or would have been, less a world that would have done less violence to their true nature than the current world. So it's about how do we find these entry points, and and the entry point of belonging to some kind of spiritual community, for instance. So you will see in a second that this idea of community is very important. In fact, whether religious or spiritual writ large, could be New Age, could even be like a spiritual in the sense of a strong sense of very, very powerfully shared moral ideals, so powerfully shared that they reach into some kind of spiritual level. These are entry points, right, that can help us deal with the rest of the secular world from a perspective that really retains a certain connection with transcendence. From this perspective, obviously, the very fact of showing an interest in spirituality and religion is useful. I notice the proactive, pragmatic INFJ at work here in the person of yours truly. If you remember, I had proposed an informal classification of pure processing INFJs, analytical INFJs, and proactive or / pragmatic INFJs as the third category being the one that's probably in some sense one that has more well-developed FE and who's kind of carving out, more practically carving out spaces in the world for themselves. Not to say that I succeed all the time, I really don't, and I experience a huge amount of issues and challenges, which is why, we all relate together. But what I would say is that here, like, the pragmatic INFJ in me comes out because I'm really thinking in terms of mental health in some way, in terms of, human psychology and the concept of a rich, fulfilling life, a life that is permeated with meaning. What we sometimes find secular time to, our secular era to lack. Of course, there's no doubt that there's advantages coming with human rights. There's advantages coming with ideals of equality, democracy, and there's no doubt that established churches have been forces of negative forces of oppression in the past. I mean, no one would deny that. But there's always pros and cons. There's always perks, and there's always drawbacks, if you like. And a lot of people think that our modern era, despite all the goods that it brings with it in terms of material goods, it is impoverishing from the spiritual point of view, and that we lead, if you like, thinner lives, right? We might lead more comfortable life. We might lead more not more meaningful, Freudian slip, more comfortable life, more affluent lives. Not for all of us, but maybe for more of us than in the past. But often people get the sense they lead thinner lives. And INFJs is going to be very, if you like, INFJs are almost like a soundboard for this. I think that they are psychologically built to be more sensitive than average to these trends as they evolve. And that certainly will be one of the topics I explore in my next book, and the book that I've been kind of cogitating for a little bit now. And who knows, I could start working on it any week from now, which hopefully will be good news for you. But anyway, all this rambling to say that to remain connected to the sense of higher times, to the sense of an enchanted world, a world where the sacred has a place, we have these entry points in spirituality and in religion. And the pragmatic INFJ speaking as the INFJ who says, leave aside for a second the idea of whether the messages are true or not. Right? Especially for an analytical INFJ, but then for a lot of other types, probably like T types, many T types, and not only T types, this might come across as slightly almost provocative proposition. Do not worry first whether the message of the religion is true. I'm saying, of course, that question is important, but you may come to a certain levels of exploration where you realize, okay, I think maybe there is one God, for some people, but to tell which one is true between all the various propositions, what's on offer, what's on the market, and the sub schools within each church, which one is the correct way? Perhaps that's something that is not within our human powers to quite define. We might have an impression, but so leaving this aside, the sense of community, the sense of being in touch with the sacred, is something that is good for our human, and in the case of what I'm advocating in this video, INFJ psychology. The sense of recovering the sense of the meaningful in the external world. the sense of being thrown into a community whereby you can engage your FE, such as to reconnect with your SE indirectly, as I am perpetually reminding you that I argue in this book, on the Ecstatic Soul. A lot of alienated INFJs, just like a lot of alienated INTJs, like a lot of alienated people in general of different types, find in type a buffered identity. It's another term that I find very useful. Me against them. This is what makes me special. This is what makes me different. This is a false solution, because everyone deep down is crying out for leading a meaningful, happy life as much as possible. We're never going to do that in isolation. And the others, l'enfer c'est les autres, said Sartre. Hell is other people. It can be difficult, especially if you have existentialist proclivities, but the sense of community, the sense of engaging earthly function is always ultimately going to be good for you. So a religion or a spirituality that combines respect for the sacred, respect for higher times that are not secular in this sense, right? Like I said in the previous video, it can be God's time, it can be the times of Platonic ideas, transcendent realm, it can be time out of mind, time of origins. That's kind of a sense of higher time. The sacred can also be feeling like you're in sacred spaces, like in a church or in face of a relic or whatever it might be. Sense of community is you get to do things with other people, you get at least to have a sense of strong kinship and communication with other people. There are certain forms of spirituality that in fact do not really promote this, or at least are at risk of letting the person who's seduced by them slide towards an individualism of the buffered self, whereby they might carve out a strong identity against others for themselves. And I think that's only a recipe for further alienation. So I'm not going to name any religion in particular or any spiritual practice, but those self-help practices that are really focused much more on the individual than on the thriving as part of a wider community. If you can have a religion or spirituality that combines the notion of the higher, notion of the transcendent, with a sense of community that does not necessarily pressure you into, I'm not talking about a sect necessarily or a cult. I'm saying there's a community there that you can access. Sometimes even when you go into a church, you're not talking to the people who are there. You don't have to. Maybe you go in and to meditate or to pray or to do whatever, to just be there, but you have a sense of community with the people who are there. That's already huge. Okay, so make up your mind. I'm familiar with Catholicism because that's my religion, and I can tell you that Catholicism historically has had a lot of issues, and I'm not here to say it's perfect. It's not. People should be Catholic, of course not, but certainly it has for me the enchantment, the notion of sacred, and the community dimension that is huge. And there's no doubt Islam is the same. And what's great about Islam, perhaps even more so than Catholicism, and again, this is the pragmatic INFJ speaking, is the emphasis that Islam puts on considering, arrogance as a very, very, very cardinal sin. It really discourages the buffered self as much as it can. Promotes community. Catholicism does that too, and no doubt many forms of non-Catholic Christianity and forms of Judaism and other religions of the book do that. I am a little bit less familiar with the Eastern religions or other types of religions, but again, if it can have this sense of the transcendent and the sense of community, if you plugging it into it, I think these are the two core elements that you want to look for as a potential entry point in a society that is otherwise highly secularized, and we know there's good aspects to that too. So if we live in a pluralist world, let's find within this pluralist domain what is best for us, and let's stick to it. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments, guys. I was riffing. I wasn't really preparing this video. I found I had a bit of time this afternoon to kind of share something with you. So yeah, let me know your thoughts, and I will certainly see you at the weekend. Okay, until then, don't forget you can support me on Patreon, guys. That is very, very helpful to me. And it's anything from €3 a month onwards, and you get bonus content. So think about it. Bye bye.